Two cases, I believe, stand in this regard. In 1980, the European Commission of Human Rights in Christians Against Racism and Fascism versus UK held that, and I quote, "The right to freedom of peaceful assembly is secured to everyone who has the intention of organising a peaceful demonstration." It goes on to say the possibility of violent counter-demonstrations or the possibility of extremists with violent intentions, not members of the organising association, joining the demonstration, cannot as such take away that right, even if there is a real risk of a public procession resulting in disorder by developments outside the control of those organising it. Such procession does not for this reason fall outside the scope of Article 11. Quote. Now, 8 years later, the European Court of Human Rights gave judgment in the Platform versus Austria. Forgive me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if I quote from that judgment, but given the history of intolerance shown towards loyal order demonstration, it is perhaps helpful to show where the balance of rights lie in a lawful society. And I quote, "A demonstration may annoy or give offence to persons opposed to the ideas or claims that it is seeking to promote. The participants must, however, be able to hold the demonstration without having to fear that they will be subjected to physical violence by their opponents. Such a fear would be liable to deter associations or other groups supporting common ideas or interests from openly expressing their opinions on highly controversial issues affecting the community. In a democracy, the right to counter-demonstrate cannot extend to inhibiting the exercise of the right to demonstrate." It goes on, "The genuine, effective freedom of peaceful assembly cannot therefore be reduced to a mere duty on the part of the state not to interfere. A purely negative conception would not be compatible with the object and purpose of Article 11. Compare, if you will, the rights articulated by the courts to the strategy organised and orchestrated by Republicans in opposing lawful parades. Gerry Adams's now infamous briefing, fortuitously caught on tape by RTE, is chillingly cynical. Let me remind members of the unguarded but authentic words of Mr. Adams. He said, "Ask any activist in the North, did Drumcree happen by accident? And he will tell you, no. 3 years of work on the Lower Armour Road, Portadown, parts of Fermanagh and Newry, Armagh and in Balaké, and up in Derry. 3 years of work went into creating that situation, and fair play to those people who put the work in. They are the type of scene changes that we have to focus on and develop and exploit." Unquote. The situation, of course, Mr. Adams refers to was one where those seeking to exercise their convention rights were prevented from doing so by violence and by the threat of violence. As I said earlier, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the demand for parading to be seen in a rights-based framework is one which every citizen of the United Kingdom, indeed of any democracy worth the name, can comfortably support. Let me dare to make the point that no matter what role Sinn Féin had in the creation of parading disputes, I contend that it is now in the interests as much of Sinn Féin as of Unionists to see a resolution found. I believe that a way forward can gain support of both sections of our community, and it is both achievable and desirable. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my colleagues and I strongly support the work of Lord Ashdown, who has been working on the strategic review of parading in Northern Ireland. My party welcomed the initiation of the review because it provided an opportunity to take a fresh look at the issue and put right the failures of the past. The review body published an interim consultative report in April of 2008. The foreword to the report is signed by all the members of the review group. All the members, Mr. Deputy Speaker, including the well-known Belfast Republican Sean Spike Murray. Now, given the consensus reached by the group, which also had a leading member of the Orange Order on it, given that consensus, in April 2008, one has to ask why the final report has not reached the Secretary of State. I make it very clear that it is no fault of Lord Ashdown that it has not reached that point. After all, the timeline envisaged in the foreword was, and I quote, to deliver the final report to the Secretary of State in the autumn of 2008, unquote. Now, the group believed their proposals could and should be brought into effect early in 2009. So why the delay? I would suggest that the reason is that Sinn Féin is seeking once again to use parading as a means to create what Mr Adams might call a situation. This time, not around anything so crude as threatening to remove any expression of Britishness, but rather an attempt to extract a political price to deliver that which has already been agreed. Now, Mr Adams and his proxy may rue the day that they linked the future of the Ashdown Review to the devolution of policing and justice powers. But in that interim report, that is precisely what they did. And just as Sinn Féin insisted that changes in parading arrangements could not move forward until policing and justice functions were devolved, so do I indicate that policing and justice functions cannot be devolved until we have moved forward with the necessary changes in parading. The Unionist community's experience of the Parades Commission has been that they have continued to issue determinations restricting Loyalist order parades or preventing them from taking place because of threats of disruption and, in cases, violence itself.